You are Locked On Pistons Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Detroit on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Here we go. Fired up for a lot. Locked On Pistons Postcast. I am your host, Jake Riepma. You can follow me on Twitter at Jake_Riepma. Formerly with 97.1 The Ticket, the Detroit Pistons flagship radio station, now with Locked On Sports Detroit. And oh, baby, what a game it was. I'm a little bit fired up. The Detroit Pistons were fired up, but they lose to the Minnesota Timberwolves 123-104 in a game they had quite the lead in early on, but it's like they ran out of guys. Oh, they did, because there were 7 different ejections in an on-court fight. The Pistons lost way too many guys, and the ejections cost Detroit in the long run because they run out of gas in this one. I'll have my turning point as well as our player of the game and, of course, what everybody's talking about. That's all coming up next on a Locked On Pistons Postcast. But as always, we thank you for making this your post-game destination, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and, of course, on YouTube as well. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Have to be providing the post-game coverage, the instant reaction show, and want you to be involved as well. So get in on the comments, because boy, do we have a lot of comments to get into on this one, or a lot of opinions, I should say, that I'm hoping to read, because I know a lot of Pistons fans getting at me on Twitter, and I appreciate that. That's what I want to say first and foremost, because that's what it's about. That's the interaction. That's why social media is great for when you're watching sports. You can interact with everybody and get your thoughts out there and respond and engage and connect and all that good stuff. So I want to say that first and foremost, but I also should back up a little bit, and I know I mentioned it, but the Pistons do lose this one 123-104, the final in Minnesota, and it was a game that saw the Minnesota Timberwolves outscore the Detroit Pistons, in particular in the second half, in the third quarter, by 15 and 10 in the fourth quarter. So overall by 25 points in the second half, because the Pistons ran out of gas and they just didn't have a lot of bodies out there. And why didn't they have a lot of bodies? Because with 8 minutes and change to go in the second quarter, that's when what hit the fan, and all HE double hockey sticks broke out on the court, a on-court brawl. You had Isaiah Stewart mixing it up. What started with Reid and Ron Holland. Reid drove to the basket, didn't like what Holland must have said, got in his face, it spills over. And a lot of people on Twitter said this, and I happen to agree with it, that it was started and escalated by the Minnesota Timberwolves, Donte DiVincenzo and Reid, both those punks. And I think they're punks. I really do. But the Pistons didn't end it. They engaged in it, and it spilled over more and more. And you lose Isaiah Stewart because it's his second technical foul of the game, whether it was the ejection for the brawl. He had a technical foul before that. And so in a span of about 14 minutes, Isaiah Stewart's got 2 technical fouls, so he's ejected. Ron Holland's ejected for the tussle he gets in with Donte DiVincenzo. And you also lose JB Bickerstaff, who's out on the court as well, throwing Marcus Sasser as well. And all of that results in the Detroit Pistons, and Greg Kessler put this perfectly, Special K, on the broadcast. The rest of the night, they're playing with one hand tied behind their back because they're just so limited with bodies on the floor already. And that's because before this game even tipped off, they were shorthanded. No Cade Cunningham, no Tobias Harris. So when you go out and you get yourself ejected, it is selfish, it is stupid, it hurts the team, and all of that couldn't have been more on full display than what transpired the rest of the game, with the Timberwolves outscoring the Detroit Pistons after the fight by 29 points. So I'm not anti-toughness, I'm not anti-chippiness, I'm anti-costing your team opportunities to win meaningful games. And tonight was a meaningful game. That's what we've hoped for. We wanted to get to this point as Pistons fans, and we're here. The regular season matters. You're vying for position in the playoffs. Every game is important, and you throw a game away because you let the emotions spill over and get 7 different guys. And I know some of the 7 total includes Minnesota. So your head coach and 3 important, impactful players tossed early in the second quarter. So you're without them the rest of the way. So everybody that got on me on Twitter when I tweeted out that this isn't toughness, it's stupid. And if you want to disagree with me, it's fine. But the results speak for themselves. After the fight, the Pistons they just didn't have enough capable guys. They didn't have bodies available. And so you're forced to put out Liddy Waters. And no disrespect to Mr. Waters, he's just not an NBA capable player to carry the load. And you're already without Cade Cunningham. You're without Tobias Harris. And so when you lose Isaiah Stewart and you lose Marcus Sasser and you also lose Ron Holland, those are important guys. And it just was so clear that even though it was started by Minnesota, it was probably Minnesota's fault, and their guys looked like clowns as well. This was going to cost the Detroit Pistons, and it did. There's no other way to put it. And I would love to read some of the comments on it, even in addition to what was tweeted at me, calling me stupid and everything else. And yeah, I get that. I understand that I didn't say the most complimentary things about our team, the Detroit Pistons. I love the Detroit Pistons. I want them to win meaningful games. I don't want them to play and be forced to play with Liddy Waters and Paul Reid, and no disrespect to those guys, you're just not going to win a lot of games when you're trotting them out. And Simone Fontecchio and all those guys that are role players are the only players left on the roster to make impactful, important plays. They're just not good enough. I'll take, unfortunately, you know, Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert are a heck of a lot more talented than the players I just mentioned. That's just the way it is. And I understand if that upsets people, but I don't think what we saw tonight was toughness. I think it was stupid, emotional, letting your emotions play you. We had a coach that used to say, play with emotions, but don't let your emotions play you. So, and I would also add that I'm not anti-fighting when you can, but you can't go and get yourself ejected. It's not. Fighting doesn't exist in the confines of the game. It's not hockey. You don't fight and then get a 5-minute penalty and then you're back on the ice. If you fight in basketball, you're out. And it cost the Pistons tonight. And they just simply ran out of gas following the ejections. And if you don't believe me, just look at the way the game played out. They're up 10 at the time of the fight. And thankfully it's round numbers because I'm not good with math. And by the end of the game, they lose by 19, 10 plus 19, 29. They were minus 29 following the fight. And a lot of it was because they just didn't have the bodies because they were ejected. But appreciate everybody getting in on the action on a live Locked On Pistons postcast. I'm a little fired up tonight after the Pistons give one away in Minnesota. And it was a game they're up 16 in. That's another thing. They came out ready to go, and you love the way they were playing early on. But just like I mentioned in that game in Indiana where the chippiness took them out of their game. I understand it's JB Bickerstaff's team, and they've tripled their win total, and they've implemented a turnaround. They deserve all the credit in the world for that. I'm not taking anything away from what this team has become, the identity of this team, and so on and so forth. But there have been multiple occasions this year where they get taken out of their game. And all of a sudden, this edge that we talk about, this grittiness, this toughness, whatever you want to call it, turns a little bit further from that to foolishness, to chippiness, to ejections, and all the things that have negative connotation, like what we saw tonight. And I just think there needs to be a time where someone somehow in a different manner gets through to these guys that you can be tough, you can play with an edge, you can be gritty, you can do all of that within the confines of the game. And I believe this Pistons team has the ability to do so, and they do it often. And a lot of the games they've won with that. And again, so I'm not trying to tell the Pistons not to play that way, but you can't let it cost you with ejections and it's spilling over because it's such a fine line. But appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll get to some comments. Demetrius McNeil is up first. Jake, we're talking about the technical fouls, 6 technical fouls, 4 ejections. By the way, Pistons lead was 10 points before the fight took place. That has to stop, or it's a first-round exit in April. Demetrius, I appreciate your comments, and not just because you agree with me, but the proof is right there in the analysis of this game. After the ejections, they didn't have the bodies to compete with the Minnesota Timberwolves. And it goes, I know it was early, but it goes from a game you're in control of to a game that you kind of lose going away. And it changed quickly as a result to, in my opinion, the Pistons' foolish approach to handling their business or lack thereof, and letting the brawl spill over into all the different ejections that cost this team. All right, a couple more comments. You got Educated Tyrone with the fire emojis. I appreciate that. Enrique Rojas, they have the referees on their side. We got the shaft. It's not about refereeing. It's not about any of that. It's about the Pistons controlling their emotions, playing with an edge, but not letting it spill over into upright foolishness, and it's discouraging to see a team that has the potential that we've seen from this Pistons team give games away because they wanted to be the tough guys out there. They wanted to end it and not let anyone stand up to them and whatever it is that maybe I just don't understand, and that's fine. But tonight it was clear that costs this Detroit Pistons team. And I know I've gone a little bit long-winded, but let's go ahead and make that our talking about segment, because it's what we've been talking about.
This is what you'll be talking about.
My final thought with the ejections, with the fights, with the technicals, all of that is this team just has to get to a point to where they can play that way without letting it spill into where it costs them. And they can play with an edge, they can play with emotion, but not to the point where they're taken out of their game like they were tonight. And I don't want to take anything away from what this team's identity has become and the drastic, impressive turnaround that they've had, the greatest turnaround in NBA regular season history by number of win totals. It's all good. But tonight, it felt like, wow, this is where it really boils over. And maybe, just maybe, this will be the time that they learn their lessons. But coming up, we are going to talk more about the actual game, what went wrong. I'll have my turning point of the game. We'll have our player of the game, and we'll take your comments. That's all next on Live Locked On Pistons POSTCAST. Hey, this episode of the Locked On Pistons Postcast is brought to you by Game Time. You got to download the Game Time ticket app because it's the best in the business, my friends. It's that simple. Game Time's got you covered because you know what? I love going to live events, and there's nothing like watching basketball live. The energy of the crowd. I mean, imagine if you were in Minnesota tonight. Maybe somebody was. Let me know in the comments. The sound of the sneakers on the hardwood, maybe even a celebrity sighting courtside, or in tonight's case, a fight courtside. If you want to catch a game in person, Game Time makes getting tickets easier than ever. Game Time's new feature, Game Time Picks, filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time scrolling through thousands of tickets. It's easy to use on the app. I love the super deals as well, and the peace of mind with seat views before you buy, no surprise fees. You don't want to end up like the guy that always has the obstructed view. And I love the lowest price guaranteed. You can book with total confidence. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create that account, my friends. Redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, that's LOCKEDONNBA, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? Game time. All right, Pistons lose to the Minnesota Timberwolves after the ejections. They really ran out of gas, just didn't have enough left in the tank because they didn't have enough guys. I will say a really impressive performance from Malik Beasley. He carried the load offensively with quite literally not really another viable option, but 27 points for him. 8 of 18 from the floor. But got to go for our turning point in this game. And I'm seeing video footage of it right now as I put it on. We all know where we're going with the turning point.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
Completely different game after the fight. And I hate to make this a one topic post-game show, but that's our instant reaction tonight. And that's what the post-game show is for, is the turning point was that fight with the ejections to Reid. You had Donte DiVincenzo in there. You had, for the Pistons, Holland, Isaiah Stewart, Marcus Sasser, JB Bickerstaff, that coach, everybody getting the boot because of the violence that spilled onto the court, and those poor cameramen were all right there. But I'm sure more is going to come out with this, possible suspensions looming and whatever it may be, but it was not a good look, and it's unfortunately our talking point tonight. And for the Minnesota Timberwolves, maybe the Pistons had a little bit of a jolt immediately thereafter, but for the betterment of the remaining contest, it was all Minnesota, outscoring the Pistons by 29 following the fight for the game. But that is our talking point. It's time now for our player of the game.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
Locked On Pistons player of the game has to be for the opposition tonight, unfortunately, because there were several guys that just had their way, especially in that third quarter and that second half. And at the top of the list, Julius Randle, 26 points for Minnesota, and also very impressive Anthony Edwards, because he was held very he was very quiet early on in the game, still finished with 25 points. But Rudy Gobert, what an impact he had, 19 points, but by the way, 25 rebounds. He was plus 18. So that combination of Randle, Gobert, and Anthony Edwards, very, very tough for the Detroit Pistons tonight. And again, a game that Detroit was in control of for a period of time at the very beginning until it turned that way. All right. A couple more comments to get into. Robert here just saw Holland had all ball. DiVincenzo started it. Yeah, I agree. I agree that the majority was started and even amplified by the Minnesota Timberwolves and heightened. And they look silly. They look foolish. And if I was doing a Locked On Timberwolves, Locked On Minnesota Timberwolves, not the Northwood Timberwolves, my alma mater, which you see a lot of Northwood memorabilia in the back there. But anyways, the Minnesota Timberwolves, if I was doing their show, I would be saying the same thing, but hey, it didn't cost us a win. And that's what people on Twitter were getting at me for. But again, I don't care about the Minnesota Timberwolves. I care about the Detroit Pistons. And tonight was a winnable game that got away because you ran out of bodies, because they were all ejected, because you had to be tough guys and fight everybody on the field. So, or on the court, I should say. I'm fired up. But that being said, Pistons will look to bounce back, and the schedule's tough. I mean, that's another reason why these games matter, because all of a sudden now, after the big win against the Cleveland Cavaliers, which was so awesome. By the way, apologies for no post-game show after that. I was hosting and emceeing a charity event, so for a very good cause, but wasn't able to be on for that. But 133-122 win over the Cavaliers, and you feel like there should be a lot of momentum following that. And just a day and a half later is you see the Pistons falling to the Timberwolves. But I mentioned the tougher schedule. That's because the Pistons take on the Oklahoma City Thunder Wednesday in Oklahoma City. A little bit easier than against the Raptors, who are obviously actively tanking. And then the Memphis Grizzlies come to town on Saturday. And I know they just fired their coach, but still a very, very tough team. Kings, Knicks, Bucks is how the season ends in the regular season. So there you have it. Appreciate everybody tuning in. And even though the Detroit Pistons lose tonight, they've got the opportunity to bounce back against the Minnesota Timberwolves, or against the Oklahoma City Thunder on Wednesday. So thanks as always for tuning in. It's always a pleasure to be on the air. Don't forget our Locked On Tigers postcast following Tigers games. That's over on Locked On Tigers. And for the Locked On Pistons postgame shows right here on Locked On Sports Detroit. My name is Jake Rima. Thanks as always for tuning in. Don't forget to sign up for the daily newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. And don't forget to subscribe to Locked On Sports Detroit, your postgame destination for all things Detroit Pistons. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Hopefully you'll join us tomorrow night for Locked On Tigers. It'll be late night following Tigers and Seattle and the Seattle Mariners. And then we'll have Locked On Pistons Wednesday following Pistons and Thunder. So have a wonderful evening. See you next time on Locked On Pistons Postcast.